Good evening and welcome to PJTN Facebook Live. This is our first show, our first program, and I'm excited that you all are tuning in this evening to join us to learn a little bit more about what's happening in Israel. We're going to talk about the rise of anti-Semitism in the last year, but also talk about the new development, the exciting news of what happened last week when President Donald Trump decided to finally allow the embassy, the U.S. Embassy, to be moved to Jerusalem from the financial capital of Israel in Tel Aviv to the biblical, eternal, historical, spiritual capital. So it's an exciting time to be alive. And I just want to celebrate with our Jewish brethren in Israel and around the world. It's such a historic time. So anyhow, let's talk a little bit about, I want to introduce you to the organization. Those of you who are not really familiar with PJTN, you may be on our Facebook page and following us and following some of the articles. But I want to bring you into the Facebook or the PJTN family. And I appreciate you taking the time this evening to be here. And we're going to kind of just go through, I'm going to give you some information, update you on what's going on. And I really want to hear from you. I want to hear your questions. I want to talk about these issues. One of the things that we have been confronting here at Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, or PJTN, and for those of you who haven't had the chance to visit our website, I want to encourage you to go to pjtn.org, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the program. First, for those of you who are not familiar with the organization, Proclaiming Justice to the Nations' mission is to educate Christians about their biblical responsibility to stand with our Jewish brethren and defend the state of Israel against the rise of anti-Semitism. We have been a nonprofit since 2005. We really started the organization in 2002 when in Tennessee we were the second state in the country to pass a pro-Israel resolution supporting Israel in her war on terror. Of course, that was 6 months after 9/11. So it was an important time in the history of our country. And of course, when I saw the second plane fly into the Twin Towers, I knew that Amalek had come to our shores. And God said he would wage war against Amalek from generation to generation. But I was a little confused as to why Amalek would show up on the United States shores. Why not Israel? Because this was Israel's battle, right? Well, that's what I thought. And of course, the rest is history. But what we do in order to educate Christians, we use our media expertise. My husband and I have over 50 years combined of media experience. We've won Emmys. My husband's a two-time Emmy award-winning director. Of course, I have a media background in front of and behind the camera. And so in 2003, after my first trip to Israel, when I saw the truth firsthand, I came back from Israel and I told my husband, I said, we have to help Israel. The media is eating Israel alive and they don't get a fair shot. And of course, Israel at the time wasn't doing very well when it came to making their case, but there's really a biblical position for that. They shouldn't be. There's a scripture in the Bible that says, let no other man praise you, or let another man praise you. You are not to praise yourself. And so we decided to take the effort, this initiative on and use media. So we produce our own original content, both documentary films, programs, Focus on Israel. For those of you who are not familiar with our 30-minute episodic weekly program, it airs on many different networks, many different media platforms, Internet Protocol, and you can learn again get more information about that if you go to the website at pjtn.org. But anyhow, we decided to start producing these films. I serve as the President's Council member at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention. We've been there since 2007, and we've been involved in distributing media content from a biblical perspective about our Christian responsibility to defend and stand with Israel. And so as we have produced this programming, we have distributed through those broadcasters at the NRB. And for those of you who are not familiar with the National Religious Broadcasters Convention, NRB is the largest Christian broadcasters convention in the world, the most prestigious. Every year they have a conference. And of course, this year coming up, 2018, it's going to be in Nashville. I hope you'll plan to join us on March 1st. But every year we distribute our programming. We showcase the media, the content. We meet with radio networks, broadcasters, talk show hosts. We've met with print media as well to try to get our message out in all of the different media platforms about this important message. But as a result of that relationship that we've had, we have 19 media partners globally, and just this fall we're excited to announce that we have just surpassed 1 billion potential viewers around the world. Now, I can tell you that our goal, we set out to educate Christians, but it ended up happening that we had members of the Jewish community around the world who also started to tune in and watch our programs. So we get to hear from people from all over the world, different faith backgrounds, who tell us how much they've learned from our programs. And so this is just this Facebook Live, this weekly program that we're starting to initiate, is just one more opportunity for us to try to connect with you, our supporters, to try to communicate about these issues and talk to you and inform you. So the program, this Facebook Live program, is really going to be kind of a biblical, historical, archaeological lesson about Israel's rights to our ancient homeland. We have seen, unfortunately, a rise of anti-Semitism around the globe. But the most disturbing rise in anti-Semitism is what we've witnessed here in the United States of America. Just in 1 year, we've seen a 67% increase in anti-Semitic incidents. Unfortunately, a lot of those incidents are occurring on our college campuses across the country. And of course, we shouldn't be surprised that it's happening there, because we've also found content in our textbooks in our secondary schools where our children are being indoctrinated with propaganda that is really spilling over into the university experience. So we decided in educating Christians to try to activate them by giving them the information, by educating them, and then providing the tools to inform their friends, their family, even their children, which is so important, because the information that you're going to see in our documentary films and our television shows is not going to be information that your children are going to hear in school. But as a result of us educating, broadcasting, and then educating Christians around the world, we saw the outgrowth of that when a parent here in our local community contacted us when she stumbled upon her son's textbook in high school. It was a Pearson published textbook, Human Geography, that basically had a quote that legitimized Palestinians blowing themselves up in a Jerusalem restaurant because they were waging a war against Israeli government policies and army actions. Of course, she brought this textbook to my attention and made me aware of the problem, and we went through the proper protocol to try to remove the textbook. We met with the teacher, with the principal of the school, the superintendent. We even made a case before the school board in our local district. We thought, surely, you know, we live in an evangelical Christian community. We're here in Tennessee. We're considered the belt buckle of the Bible Belt. So you would think that the teachers, the principals, the school board members, even the superintendent of schools would be also equally as concerned about the content. But unfortunately, we found great resistance and unwillingness to remove the textbook. We also, as a result of launching a media campaign, again, because of our media background, when we launched that campaign exposing that textbook, we ended up hearing from parents and citizens all over the country. We were fortunate enough to be on Fox News. There were a couple of interviews over the span of 2 weeks. where Fox and Friends had interviewed me about this growing issue in our schools, and it was virtually unknown. But as a result of that program, we started hearing from parents in Texas, in Colorado, in Ohio, in New York, Florida, and of course the state of Tennessee. So we decided to address the issue. Fortunately for us, we do have a state legislature here in Tennessee that is equally concerned and very pro-Israel. We've passed numerous resolutions since the first one in 2002, representing we the people and our support, our unequivocal support for the state of Israel. But our state legislature took notice and had held hearings in our state capitol to talk about this growing problem. And as a result of what we were able to do in one community, we were able to ignite the communities around us, other counties, and also the state legislature decided to abolish the Tennessee Textbook Commission that had actually approved that anti-Semitic textbook. And they reinstated a new commission to review the textbooks, involving more parents across the state. So we were encouraged by that, but it wasn't enough. They did change the law as to the way we adopt and review textbooks in the state. In fact, in Tennessee, we are going to be reviewing textbooks once again as our history, social studies, and geography standards have been reevaluated, and we have new standards. That means new textbooks, new curriculum, new instructional materials. One of the things that we found disturbing about the content in the textbooks, and again, this is all important to why are we seeing this increase, the 67% increase in the United States in anti-Semitism. And as I stated earlier, the anti-Semitism that we're witnessing is not just happening on college campuses. We hear a lot about that in the press, but it's also happening on our secondary school campuses, which is equally disturbing. But as we set out to engage and move through this process, we started to research about Pearson publishers. Many of you on Facebook are probably well aware of Common Core. If you're not, again, go to the website. We've got resource material to help you learn about it. You can always Google it. But Common Core is really the culprit behind the content in the textbooks. We were told initially that Common Core had nothing to do with the textbooks. However, Pearson, who is pushing Common Core in 37 states across the country, Pearson Publishers controls the standards of what the students learn. They also control the testing. Well, if you control the standards and you control the testing, then obviously you're going to control the content in the textbooks, because no school district is going to purchase textbooks that aren't going to comply with the state standards that are required and also help the students test out well on their tests. And of course, this is being pushed by the federal government. Jeb Bush is a big backer of Common Core. In fact, when we were trying to stop Common Core here in Tennessee, Jeb Bush came to Tennessee, commandeered our speaker's office, brought in the Republican leadership, and told them that they needed to get behind Common Core. Well, of course, we told Jeb Bush to go back to Florida, and of course, we went after him there. And Florida, fortunately, is one of the states, for those of you on Facebook who are from the state of Florida, next to Tennessee, Florida is one of the most active states that we are involved in. And if you as a parent or a grandparent, or you're even a student watching this program and you find content in your textbooks in your community, we want to hear from you. So I wanted to talk about that, to talk about how the textbooks, the content, and we may have some people on Facebook this evening who want to talk about that, who may have experienced that, or maybe you're seeing some of the content in your students' homework. There was a recent incident in one of the, I believe it was an Illinois school earlier this week, that also a parent found a problematic handout that was given to their child. So this is going on all the time. We hear about what's happening in Newton, Massachusetts. So this is nothing new. But this is spilling over into our college campuses. And not only are we pushing and helping parents and citizens in counties and school districts across the country to take back local control of their children's education through their local efforts by being engaged and involved with the school board. We're encouraging parents to consider running for office. You know, we as Americans have a government by the people, for the people, and we the people need to actively be involved in our government. And a lot of people say to me, well, I have no experience in politics. That's okay. That's even better. You know, our founding fathers did not establish this constitutional republic for career politicians to run it. They established this constitutional republic so that we the people would be involved and engaged in what was going on in our government, in our government affairs. But one of the other projects that has been launched as a result of our education initiative at PJTN is also our involvement in what's happening on college campuses. As we started to research the textbooks, we realized we started hearing from parents also who had college students who had problems with some of the content of what they were being taught in their Middle East Studies programs. And so as we started to research what was happening on college campuses, what's fueling this anti-Semitism on our college campuses, you know, like I said earlier, to the tune of 67% increase, where most of that activity is happening on college campuses, we started looking at the groups that were fueling, that were aiding and abetting this anti-Semitic communication or narrative on college campuses. And of course, we found the Students for Justice in Palestine and the Muslim Student Association. These two organizations should not be operating on any college campus in the United States of America. These two organizations have ties to the Muslim Brotherhood. And somehow our universities, public and private, give these people, these students, fair game on college campuses to continue to not only harass and insult and threaten the Jewish students, but now even Christian Zionist students as well. We had an incident that happened here in Tennessee, and this is reflective of things that are going on college campuses all over the country. But Vanderbilt University, we all know about Vanderbilt. It's a prestigious university, private university. There was an incident one weekend where someone had gotten into the Jewish fraternity building, the AE Pi building, and spray painted swastikas all over the building. And of course, we were just in the process of launching a resolution to expose these groups. And the resolution here in Tennessee, the resolution specifically called out SJP and MSA, the Muslim Student Association, and the Students for Justice in Palestine group, because these are the groups that are inciting this violence. These incidents that are occurring on our college campuses are denying our Jewish students and Christian Zionist students their constitutional right to free speech. It is silencing them from intimidation. It also violates the Civil Rights Act, because the Jewish students and Christian Zionist students, but Jewish students specifically, through the Civil Rights Act, do not feel safe anymore on our campuses. And we have seen, it doesn't matter what state you live in, you have at least one university where there's been incidents. And this is what we're finding in our research as we're talking to students across the country. But it's this type of activity that is fueling this anti-Semitism, this violence. And of course, to move into what Donald Trump did last week, we are now witnessing again an uptick in anti-Semitic incidents in the United States and around the world. We know last week there was a firebomb of a synagogue in Sweden. There was a rally in New York City this past Friday where they were calling for the Intifada again. These were Arabs, Muslims who were calling for Intifada again, which basically is violence against Jews. And these people are allowed to spew this hatred in our country and get away with it. But what we have to do as American citizens, which is so critically important, is we have to be engaged in this debate. The Trump's decision last week to finally allow the Jerusalem Embassy Act to go into effect was probably going to be one of the most historically, biblically impactful event of his presidency. And I want to commend the president for taking the bold move, for being willing to do what other presidents were unwilling to do before. Just to give you a little background on the Jerusalem Embassy Act and how it came to fruition. In 1995, the 104th Congress, again, our government, representing we the people, decided to pass the Jerusalem Embassy Act. And the Jerusalem Embassy Act was introduced because it happened to be the 3,000th anniversary of Jerusalem, of David ruling over Jerusalem. And so it was an opportunity for we the people of the United States to speak in solidarity with our Jewish brethren, the Judeo-Christian nation, the United States of America, to speak in solidarity with them and celebrate with them a historic anniversary where King David was once the king of an undivided Israel, and he was leading his kingdom from Jerusalem, which is the eternal capital of the state of Israel. Not only was that a historic move for President Trump, but it was also historic and very an incredibly biblically prophetic event that he did. And you know, there's a scripture when the day that on Wednesday last week when he was giving his speech, I stood there and the only verse I could think of was Genesis 12:3, where God told Abraham, I will bless those who bless you and curse him who curses you. And all the nations of the world shall bless themselves by you. If we were to actually read that verse in the Hebrew, translated properly, it would be read, God told Abraham in Genesis 12:3, I will bless those who bless you, Abraham, and he who ignores you, I will utterly destroy. That's a powerful verse, and it should be a sobering verse for not just us, those of us in the United States of America, but for people around the world. God established a covenant with a very specific people, Israel. I tell my students that Israel is a book, or the Bible is a book that is written to Israel, for Israel, and about Israel. And as Christians, we were grafted into the Commonwealth of Israel through Jesus or through Yeshua. That enables us to be part of something that is so huge and so big. And unfortunately, we have seen, as a result of Trump's decision, Christian leaders around the world and in Jerusalem, even the Pope, condemning Trump's decision, saying that it was going to bring harm. And I challenge those Christian leaders because I'd like to know what Bible they read from. I remember a couple years ago when we were filming the Boycott This documentary, we were actually in Israel interviewing Arabs, Muslims and Christian Arabs, to get their feedback on what was really going on in Israel. Was Israel really an apartheid state, like what we've heard on our college campuses and what we hear from, you know, some of the Palestinian leaders and Arab leaders around the world? And what I found interesting about those discussions was that one pastor or minister in the Palestinian controlled areas said that he doesn't study the Old Testament because it's too Zionist. However, when I interviewed Christian Arabs, some who used to live in Bethlehem but had to flee since 1993, 1994, since Oslo, because Bethlehem came under the Palestinian Authority. And when Bethlehem came under the Palestinian Authority, the Christians were not protected. And now we know that over 80% of Christians who used to live in Bethlehem governed by the Palestinian Authority, have fled Bethlehem. However, we found that Christians who lived in Nazareth, a city maybe 70 miles north of where Bethlehem is, where Muslims, Christians, and Jews all live together. And of course, Nazareth, the city where Jesus grew up, Nazareth is protected by the Israeli government. You don't have Christians that are fleeing. So there's a huge difference. There's a huge disparity in what is being communicated. We interviewed Muslims, Arabs, who told us that they would rather live under an Israeli government than under an Arab or Muslim government, because under the Israelis, they were free to live their lives and worship as they wanted to. They had freedoms that they didn't have in Arab countries. Most of the world never hears this story. And we actually, I want to encourage you, I'm going to have at the end of the program, we're going to talk about a special that we're going to have for you, for those of you who are tuned in tonight. But Boycott This documentary is the one that I'm talking about. This is so important. It was produced for a millennial audience because we know that the millennials are not being educated about these facts on their college campuses, whether it's in the United States or any other university throughout Europe. But that's an important film, and that's where we showed the interviews of these people to hear their story. We heard from Arabs who said that they were treated very well in hospitals. We interviewed 3 Arab students who actually go to a university in Ariel, one of the leading cancer research universities. And of course, if you listen to the rhetoric coming out of the Palestinian-controlled areas, the area that Ariel is in, or the university in Ariel, the city, is in the West Bank, and it's occupied territory. However, these 3 Muslim students who go to school, university, with Jewish students were interviewed and said that when they first came to the university, they knew that they were going to be going to school with Jewish students, and they weren't sure if that would work. And they all admitted that they found that they could. That's the story that we need to hear more of, and unfortunately, we don't. So that's what we're trying to communicate. There's another documentary I want to encourage you all, and this is going to be part of the package deal, Israel Indivisible. This documentary is the definitive film about Israel's historical, archaeological, legal, and biblical rights to her ancient homeland. We have a segment in here about Jerusalem and the city of David, where every day artifacts are being uncovered. It's amazing to me how everybody, the world says that the Temple Mount doesn't belong to the Jews, that it belongs to the Muslims. And every day we hear of archaeologists who are doing digs all over Jerusalem, all over the country, and they're finding all kinds of evidence to prove that the Israelites, that the Jews actually lived in this land. And so it's an amazing thing to see. In fact, one of the things that amazed me also as I was doing research about what was happening with the embassy, Jerusalem Embassy Act, I came across a publication that was published by the Muslim Supreme Council. And it's called A Brief Guide to the Haram al-Sharif. It was written in 1925. In it, there's a quote. It speaks about Jerusalem's Temple Mount. And it states that its identity with the site of Solomon's Temple is beyond dispute. Now, this is coming from the Supreme Muslim Council in 1925, stating the identity of the site of Solomon's Temple, the Temple Mount, is beyond dispute. This, too, is the spot. Now, I'm continuing the quote. This, too, is the spot, according to universal belief, on which David, King David, built there an altar unto the Lord and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. That quote that Muslim had documented in his publication, or the Muslim Supreme Council had documented in their publication, actually comes out of the book of Samuel, 2 Samuel chapter 24. How amazing that the Bible is it's so right on for all time, whether it was written thousands of years ago by Moses and the prophets, it's still relevant. There's another scripture that I wanted to share with you that is important to note about Jerusalem, because this whole battle and this debate over whether we should move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem is found in 2 Chronicles chapter 6. And it's verse 5 and 6. And I want to read this for you because this is who this city belongs to. It says, "From the day when I took my people, Israel, out of the land of Egypt," and this is God speaking, "I did not choose a city from among all the tribes of Israel in which to build a temple where my name would be. Nor did I choose a man to be a ruler over my people Israel, but I, Almighty God, chose Jerusalem for my name to be there. And I chose David to rule over my people." What was documented in Chronicles by Solomon was that God could have chosen any city among the 12 tribes of Israel, and he could have chosen any person, but he chose Jerusalem, and he chose King David. And this is documented. It's no surprise that we can go into the city of David in Jerusalem and we can find the evidence at the City of David dig that testifies to the truth in this book. You know, I've been doing interviews all week, and people have been asking me, you know, why would I use the Bible to make my case? And I say to them, why not? The Smithsonian Institute, a secular organization, even states that the Bible is the best historical document in history because the people and the events actually took place. That's the Smithsonian Institute. We know it has. We see the evidence. Again, the films, the documentaries, the Focus on Israel shows all talk about these things. So I want to encourage you to if you want to learn more and you want to be better versed and understand the whole historical perspective, I want to encourage you to go to our website again at pjtn.org and order that. I want to look at the time we've got. It's 6:30 right now, but I wanted to also just mention a couple of other things that I think is important and significant to mention. You know, as Christians, people ask me why Christians, why should America be fighting for this issue? Why should we be supporting President Trump? And make no mistake, President Trump's decision to move the embassy, the U.S. Embassy, was because of the evangelical support. Since 1995, since that bill, the Jerusalem Embassy Act, was passed by Congress with overwhelming bipartisan support, representing, again, we the people. It is important for us as Christians, as a Judeo-Christian nation, despite what some people will tell us, but this country was founded by Jews and Christians, and it was our Jewish brethren who helped bankroll the American Revolution, to which we as Christians, American Christians, should be ever indebted to. But I remind the Christians that in the word Jerusalem, the three letters in the center of Jerusalem is USA. Jerusalem. And I remind Christians, where else should the United States Embassy be but in the heart of Jerusalem? You know, I read the scripture in 2 Chronicles to you about God saying in chapter 6, verse 6, that he put his name in that city. If you were to, after we get off Facebook, and you were to Google a map of the topography of the city of Jerusalem, or a visual from a satellite over the city of Jerusalem, you would see God's name carved into the mountain. Shin, which is a Hebrew letter, the Hebrew letter Shin actually means God. It's God's word. It's God's name. I'm sorry. It's God's name. And if you look at a map from a satellite right over the city of Jerusalem, you will see a Shin. A Shin looks like a W. You will see the mountain images where there are 3 mountain ridges and there are 2 valleys. God did say he was going to put his name in that city, and he literally carved it out. It truly is there. It's very exciting. So I want to take some time now, if there's any questions, because we're running, I wanted to try to keep this program at about an hour, and I want to give you all time to ask questions. So if you've got any comments, please go ahead and type them in, and I'd be happy to answer them for you. And of course, I want to encourage you, while we're waiting for some questions, for people to send some questions. I see comments up here. Let me see what we got. Okay, so I see Brooke Rice giving us an outstanding, thank you, Brooke. Thanks for tuning in tonight. And Michaela, yes, you are correct. I wish more people would read the Bible. Me too. You know, as we were talking about the problem with our textbooks, there's a thing going on called revisionist history. And it's happening in our textbooks. And it's not just happening here in the United States. It's happening all over the world. I serve as the president of Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, but I also have the honor and privilege of serving as a special envoy at the United Nations for the World Council of Independent Christian Churches. And boy, let me tell you, that is the seat of not just anti-Semitism, but revisionist history as well, especially as it pertains to Israel and the Middle East. But one of the problems that we also see that is growing is revisionist history, biblical history. We have leaders who call themselves Christians who condemn what Donald Trump did, but they don't have a verse. They don't have a book. They don't have a chapter. They don't have a verse to reference when they're condemning what Donald Trump did. However, just since we've been on this program, we've been on this Facebook Live, I've shared with you at least 2 verses. And there's so many more that we always reference. That's why it's so important. You know, when you come on this program every week, it is going to be a history lesson. It's also going to be a Bible study lesson, because the Bible is the foundation of our truth. And I remind my students that the Torah is a book, as I said earlier, written to Israel, for Israel, about Israel. And it is the foundation, it is the plumb line of all truth. The prophets have to declare that truth, and so does the New Testament for Christians. The New Testament, when you look at the disciples and the apostles, they were not quoting each other. Jesus wasn't quoting himself. They were all quoting the prophets. They were quoting Moses. So it's important that we as Christians, if we want to be relevant and accurate about this, about what's going on in the Middle East, we have to know history, we have to know our Bibles, and we have to pray, because prayer is the way God reveals by the power of his Holy Spirit. That's how he reveals truth to us. So I want to look and see if we have any more comments or questions. Jackie, amazing amount of knowledge here. Thank you. Yes, so I'm sure Jackie's going to be back next week also. Brooke, total chills when I heard Jerusalem, Jerusalem. You know, it's interesting because, Brooke, I have people who ask me all the time, well, where is America in the end times, in prophecy? They think that we're going to be obliterated. And I say to them, no. Look at the English word Jerusalem. We are in the heart of that word. We're in the center of it. And if we understand that, you know, the United States, I said earlier, the United States of America is a Judeo-Christian nation. And many people, and I find this surprising, but I'm not surprised by it because this is not taught in our history books here in America. But there was a wealthy Jewish banker, Haim Solomon, who actually bankrolled the American Revolution. He helped fund the campaigns, the war campaigns for George Washington. And this man gave everything that he had to fight the war. And do you know Haim Solomon died without a penny to his name? He died penniless. He sacrificed everything that he had because he believed in America. He believed in this experiment. He believed in what we were trying to do. This is a Judeo-Christian nation. Our founding fathers wanted to make Hebrew the original language. There's so much information and so much that I want to share with all of you. So I hope that you'll tune back in. But yes, God is in the heart of that city. And so is the United States of America. Jackie, Linda, oh my goodness, calling you. Oh yeah, okay. So anyhow, so I'm excited that you all were here. Are there any other questions, any other thoughts or comments that you want to share? And I want to thank you all for being involved tonight. It's again, we're coming up on the top of the hour, and I just want to thank you all. I also just want to remind you that are watching tonight, you know, we talked about getting involved in the battle on a local level and taking back local control of our schools. And some of you may not have children in the school system. Some of you may not even have children. And some of you may be parents, grandparents. But the only way we're going to take back control of this country is if we, the people, start getting engaged. And I want to share with you the prophet Nehemiah. God gave me the strategy when we were fighting the battle here in Tennessee to expose these textbooks, because it wasn't just the textbooks, it was instructional materials that we were handing out and giving and using to teach our children in our public schools here in Tennessee. We had approved a document, instructional material packet from CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations. For those of you who don't remember who CARE is, CARE was listed as an unindicted co-conspirator in the largest terrorist fundraising operation in the history of the United States of America. And I will tell you, an attorney once told me, because I asked him, I said, what is unindicted co-conspirator? And he said, basically, an unindicted co-conspirator is the government saying, we had the goods, but we ran out of money. How amazing that our government actually ran out of money when they hike our taxes all the time for the projects that they want. But when they have the opportunity to put an organization in prison, they decide that, oops, we just don't have enough tax dollars. It's very frightening, very disturbing. And I thank God that Donald Trump wants to drain the swamp, but we have to help him. We know we have 3 years, guaranteed 3 years. But the Lord told me to tell the people that you speak to that the strategy is found in the book of Nehemiah. When Nehemiah was given the authority to go back to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, he went and assessed the damage around the city. And he went to people who lived in front of sections of the wall, and he went to leaders of districts who lived in other sections, in front of other sections of the wall. And he convinced them all to just rebuild their section. Ironically, every one of those people went to work. It took them 52 days to rebuild the walls. And if we remember the book of Nehemiah, they were laying bricks with one hand, and they had a sword to fight in the other. They knew that they were going to be attacked. Our communities are like a section of the wall. Our counties are a section of the wall. And we, as citizens of this country, need to get more engaged politically in our local districts. And it starts with the schools. Our children are our future. And if we don't start getting involved and demanding accuracy in textbooks, because we didn't just find anti-Semitic textbooks, ladies and gentlemen. We found textbooks that were anti-Judeo-Christian, anti-American, anti-Israel, and pro-Islamic. They are indoctrinating our children, and they are teaching the instructional material that I just told you about that was published by CARE, that has their own imprint on it, was teaching our children about the 5 pillars of Islam, about the prayer of conversion. That would never happen with a prayer of conversion to Christianity, or the 10 Commandments, or how to convert to Judaism. That would never happen. We would never teach those things to our children. And people would cry foul. The ACLU would cry foul and condemn it. But we're getting away with teaching and indoctrinating our children to Islam. When we teach our children about the Barbary pirates, for those of you who don't remember the Barbary pirates were Mohammedans in North Africa. They, of course, sold their own into slavery, and they were commandeering, capturing our merchant marine vessels. It's how we got our Marines. And I don't know if my uncle is watching tonight, but he's one of my biggest fans, and he's a Marine. But they were capturing our merchant vessels, taking captive our merchant marines, and taking the goods. And Thomas Jefferson and John Adams finally had to go before Congress and said, enough is enough. We need to stop paying these people this tax. That is the history between the United States of America and Islam. And today, now in our textbooks and the curriculum, when they do teach about the Barbary pirates, they never tell our students their identity, that they were Muslims, they were Mohammedans. And so because of that indoctrination, and because it's happening in our communities, it's our responsibility to be educated, to be informed, and to speak out. And so I want to encourage you all to think about, to pray about what you might do. Attend your school board meetings. Run for the school board, because remember, the children are the keys to our future. If we do not teach our children an accurate perspective of the United States of America and our founding, and the critical role that we played historically and for all mankind globally, then we will lose this constitutional republic that God has blessed us with, that Jews and Christians can live in freely and worship freely. But it all counts on you. What will you do? So I want to thank you again. I want to see if there's any. Jessica just piped in, said hi. Thank you for being on, Jessica, for joining us. I think that's it. I want to thank you all. And again, if you go tonight, for those of you who are on, if you go to the website at pjtn.org and you make a donation of $60, I will send you a package of these DVDs. The holidays are coming up. We'll get these out to you straight away so that you can share them when you gather with your family and friends and watch the films. Invite your neighbors and have a conversation about the content in this. Let it sink in and then develop a plan. And that's what we're here for at PJTN. We're here to help you. Just like we're helping communities in Florida, Ohio, Colorado, Texas, of course, throughout the state of Tennessee and New York. We're here to serve you. But again, I want to thank you all. Are there any more questions before we sign off? I think we've got a lot of information that we've given to you all tonight. And I'm just delighted that you tune in. So thank you so much. And I hope you'll join us next week, 6 o'clock, same time, same place. And I'm pretty proud of myself. I'm honestly technologically challenged, and I survived this. And so did you. Good evening. God bless you all. And I look forward. And happy Hanukkah to our Jewish brethren. Good night.